Good to be here again. Lovely to see you all. And this has been a really instructive time for me, I have to say, because this time of the year, this time of Christmas and the stories associated with it are so much part of our cultural identity that it's almost hard to think about them. And it's been an opportunity for me, and I hope for you too, to just think again about these stories, particularly this morning about the role of the women, especially Mary, and to think, what do I actually understand is going on here? What is important for me in these stories? What do I take from them? Because to me, these infancy stories, these nativity stories, which only occur in 2 of the 4 Gospels, are hugely problematic. They don't agree. They say all sorts of things that seem mutually incompatible. What on earth is going on? Especially with Mary. Known as the Virgin Mary, we have all these wonderful pictures, don't we? And we have all the children in the nativity plays all wanting to be the Virgin Mary, you know, and she's always dressed in blue and lovely. And of course, virgin now and virgin then meant 2 different things in the language. Luke's written in Greek, and as many of you will know, because of course you are all educated people, and I'm sorry to inflict the Greek on you, but it is actually important, just for 3 words. In Greek culture and language of the time, a young woman of marriageable age who was not yet married was described as Parthenos, the Greek word, which is usually translated virgin, meant unmarried woman. She was Parthenos. And when the angel comes to Mary, she does not say, "How shall this be because I am Parthenos?" She says, "How can this be? I do not know a man." She doesn't even describe herself as a virgin. Once a woman was married to a man, she was a bride, a nymphe, where we get the word nymph from. She was not yet a full-fledged woman. She was only that when she became pregnant and gave birth to a child. She became gyne. She became a woman. So in that culture, a woman is not a woman until she's a mother. And some of the same, for slightly different reasons, is the same in Hebrew culture of the time, or Aramaic culture of the time. If a woman could not bear a child, there was something wrong with her. It wasn't that, you know, nature is like that sometimes, but actually she wasn't fully a woman. So for both Mary and Elizabeth, these 2 women together, for different reasons, one because she had not yet known a man in her terms, the other because she had been married many years and was unable to bear a child, at least until then, they are both less than fully women. But that's all the Greek I'll inflict on you. So these are the 2 barriers that God overcomes, and this is how they're presented in Luke's Gospel, as barriers that God can overcome. He can overcome barrenness, and God can overcome the lack of a man being involved at all. Although there are theories, and this is just a theory, that actually that Mary had been raped by a Roman soldier, possibly. So she was pregnant outside marriage. But there are different cultures going on here. In Matthew's Gospel, the shame culture is predominant. It is a dreadful thing to be pregnant outside marriage, as you will see in many cultures today, not so much in ours. Try telling this story to primary school children in this day and age. You know, if you mention the fact, oh, she wasn't married and that was a terrible thing, and all the teachers go, ah! Because of course our culture has changed. It is different. Back in my grandma's time, not so much. But, you know, even today, young women are they are killed. There is honour killing going on just for, being friendly with another man that wasn't picked by their parents, never mind being pregnant by him. So for Matthew, the shame culture is all important, and hence you get all the dream that Joseph has. He was going to actually get rid of Mary, not kill her, but actually just get rid of her. But in Luke's Gospel, the one we've been reading, there is none of that. It is simply that this is an obstacle for God to overcome. So something else is going on here. But however you read this, whether it's in the shame culture or the fact that it's an obstacle to God, this doctrine of the so-called Virgin Mary, and note that in Luke, yes, it's an immaculate conception, a virgin conception, but he doesn't say anything about it being a virgin birth, and certainly not ever virgin, as is the official Roman doctrine. Jesus had brothers and sisters, for goodness sake. No way. But it is something which down the years has been hugely oppressive to women. And not just in the Middle Ages, though very much so there. But this is Edward Schillebeeckx, not so long ago, saying, "It is clear that she, Mary, must be a creature of matchless wonder, this immaculate woman, with whom even the most physically and spiritually beautiful women in the world cannot in any way be compared." No, really. Leonardo Boff and the whole liberation theology thing. Mary never lived in or for herself. Mary was a woman ever at the service of others, of God, of Christ, of redemption, of the church, of the ultimate meaning of history. From this kind of perspective, Mary is robbed of everything. Mary doesn't even have a separate identity. Never mind that she didn't have an identity as mother back 2,000 years ago. But in theology, she's not even allowed to have a separate identity. She is this other, this perfect other woman to which all of us, ladies, women, wild women especially, need to aspire. So oppressive for all human relationships. Because how can men and women, or women and women, or men and men, have actual real relationships where we have this somehow other image of purity to which, in terms, all of us should be aspiring? The Women's Bible and Elizabeth Cady Stanton and her, I see Martin smiling. What a great book. So one of Elizabeth Cady Stanton's collaborators wrote, "I think that the doctrine of the virgin birth as something higher, sweeter, nobler than ordinary motherhood is a slur on all the natural motherhood of the world. I believe that millions of children have been as immaculately conceived, as purely born as was the Nazarene. And why not? Out of this doctrine and and that which is akin to it has sprung all the monasteries and nunneries of the world, which have disgraced and distorted and demoralised manhood and womanhood for 1,000 years. I place beside the false, monkish, unnatural claim of the Immaculate Conception my mother, who was as holy in her motherhood as was Mary herself. Good for her." So why on earth is this here? What on earth is going on? Why do we have these stories? And I want to suggest to you that that's exactly what they are. They are stories collected and written down well after the event, and they are there for a purpose. This idea of a miraculous pregnancy through divine intervention was not unknown in the ancient world. There were lots of instances of this. Apollo, Zoroaster, a lot of other spiritual leaders, religious figures, icons, were said to have been conceived in this way. So this was not something that just applied to Jesus. And to me, this is something that the early church looked at and said, well, they've got a virgin birth over there, why can't we have one too? Jesus was extraordinary, he must have had an extraordinary birth. So Jesus must have been born of a virgin. And it was important for the early church to say Jesus was somehow a kind of legitimate, I don't mean in the legitimate, illegitimate sense, but, you know, he was a real religious leader. So, you know, this was something extraordinary about him. Everything must have been extraordinary about him. He must have had an extraordinary childhood. He must have had an extraordinary birth. This is part of building up the identity of Jesus as somebody other. It shows divine will and power. And that is what I think is going on in Luke as opposed to Matthew. Is you've got him writing at a time when there is this kind of jostling for power. Who is greater? Is it the one God? Is it the Roman emperor? We need to see God as one who has power over everything, even natural processes of whether a woman can get pregnant or not. This is what's going on in the Lucan account when we see God overcoming the obstacle of barrenness, the obstacle of Mary not having known a man. And it's showing something about their community. They recognised in their stories the link with John the Baptist, the forerunner, who in his time was far more famous than Jesus, as far as we can tell, more accounts of him. And it's drawing on that and saying, well, they're linked in some way. We don't know in what way precisely. Maybe it was a blood relationship, but we don't know that. And it's showing the role of women as being significant, as we know they were in the early church, not in the sense of just being, you know, wives and mothers, but in the sense of solidarity with one another and of being part of, a full part of that early Christian community. And to me, these are exactly the stories that were told. And to me, that is, in a sense, all they are. On one level, they are stories. But on another level, there is something about them I want to preserve. Yes, they are about the fulfilment of prophecy. Maybe Guy will talk about that. Yes, they are about social justice. That's what the Magnificat is all about. Maybe Guy will talk about that on Christmas Day. Who knows? But the important thing is that women and men have been able to read into these stories something which is hugely important to them. Just as one example, the women in Argentina, the mothers of the sons and daughters who disappeared, have taken Mary and the whole meeting of Mary and Elizabeth, the visitation, the scene that we read, as being hugely important to them. Because this is women coming together and saying, our circumstances are really difficult. Only God can hold this situation. Only God's intervention. Because human intervention has proved fruitless. This is our only source of hope. And to those women, this story is a really important symbol for them. And yes, the fulfilment of prophecy has been important to the church all along. Why is Jesus born at Bethlehem? Because there is a story, there is a prophecy about Jesus being born at Bethlehem. Why does Jesus go to Bethlehem from wherever he was? Because it was important that he was born there for the story, wherever it was he came from. It's a hugely, hugely important cultural icon, I would suggest, this whole nativity story. It is something which has informed Western culture for hundreds and hundreds of years, over 1,000 years. And the kind of nativity scene we have now is totally dominated by this long accretion of story upon story, which starts with the gospel accounts and then adds to them and adds to them until basically the late Middle Ages we get the story, the scene that we have today with the shepherds and angels and midwives, St. Bride being one of them, and all the rest of it. But we have to ask ourselves, as I ask myself every Christmas, what out of this do I want to keep? I live with this tension every Christmas of, yes, loving the traditions. I love the nativity plays. They're beautiful. I love the music. I love singing carols. And yet, I cannot hold these stories as an article of faith. They are not the basis of my journey into God. What I take from them is, and I quote again, grace is not faceless. There is not some ideal of purity and there is not some idea of God. There is an actual divine awakening available to each one of us, seen supremely in the person of Jesus, a first, for me, fully human and fully divinely awakened being to live among us. Born of a thoroughly human woman, and all the better for that. Grace is not faceless. Grace has an actual human identity in men and women and every other identity you can think of. And maybe a few creatures as well. Who knows? So I want to ask you just to think. Do we have time for a short think together for a few minutes? What do you want to hold on to of the Christian story, of the Christmas story, sorry, the Nativity? What is it that is important to you? What things would you say, yes, this I hold as important for me? We're not thinking truth questions, but what is important about the Nativity story for you? So maybe you want to turn to your neighbour in twos and threes and just have a little buzz about what is important. What do you want to hold on to this Christmas from this story?